And he's calling that a listening exercise. That's how Trump's team is talking about his approach ahead of that one-on-one with Russia.
Look, only one party that's involved in this war is going to be present, and so this is for the president to go and to get, again, a more firm and better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this war to an end.
Ukraine's president will not be there, but Zelensky is making it clear he won't cede any land to Russia, and he must have a seat at the negotiating table moving forward.
We will definitely have a trilateral meeting at the level of leaders. I don't know the date. If we want to end the war, it will happen.
To prepare for the summit, President Putin spoke Tuesday with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who's been supplying Putin with troops. Putin and Trump will be meeting Friday at Joint Base Elmendorf, Richardson, on the north edge of Anchorage. Some of the locals don't seem too excited about that.
Having a world leader who with such a high body count is unsettling.
It's an opportunity for us to demonstrate against Trump when he's here.
I think it's an interesting meeting, although it seems kind of like it's none of our business.
Former CIA military analyst Jeffrey Edmonds joins the group chat. Thanks for being here. So we heard this concern about the land, right? When this war is over, where will be the borders of Ukraine and Russia? And I also recall that the president, eked out a resources deal with Ukraine. Is all of this conversation around land and resources?
I think that one of the misunderstandings that the administration has had going into this all along is that Putin just wants land, that he wants the Donbass. But that's just not what this is about. That's not why he invaded Ukraine. He invaded Ukraine to demilitarize Ukraine, to denazify Ukraine, and to really conduct regime change. And so as long as that hasn't happened and Putin thinks he's winning, and he is, then you're not going to see any kind of meaningful peace deal come out of a land deal.
If you think Putin is winning, what do you think is the point of this meeting?
I think that Trump is trying once again, and other presidents have done this too, they just really have this belief in the sheer power of their own personality to bring Putin around, right? He seems very reasonable in person, someone you can deal with. He's pragmatic, or at least he seems that way. But in general, every single president that has tried this has been disappointed in the end.
I want to bring something to the group. During his campaign last year, Donald Trump was talking about his ability to end wars, and he's always had his eye on ending the war in Ukraine. Here's how he talked about it.
That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together.
He believes in that knee-to-knee conversation, that it makes a difference. It has not worked with Putin. Am I misreading that?
No.
Oh, this show is easy then. Thank you for being here. So what are you thinking as he's going into this summit?
As we've seen, the expectations for this keep on getting downgraded. And I think the White House has set this up because they want to show some movement. He likes spectacle. We saw when he met Kim Jong-un, the head of North Korea, in his first term. That was a lot of spectacle that really didn't result in any kind of meaningful change. And so I think that at this point, it is a very dangerous situation that we're in, because Vladimir Putin is not your regular run-of-the-mill dictator. This is a man who is in charge of a very large country, who has killed an inordinate amount of people, and he is very clear on his objectives. And I am not very clear on what President Trump's objectives are.
I think there's a very simple answer to that, which is you can never go wrong thinking that it's ego. That the thing that it's clear that I think Donald Trump wants out of the second term is a Nobel Peace Prize. And in sort of conflict after conflict this year, we've seen Donald Trump sort of declare that he was the one who settled it. Even though in cases like India and Pakistan, that has puzzled the people who were actually engaged in the conflict when he declares victory in settling the conflict. And so I think this is spectacle, as Lulu says, but it's also, I think, part of what he views as sort of his grand ambition of being a peacemaker.
Jeffrey, every time I feel like someone showed me a chart when the president speaks with Putin kind of on the phone, afterwards, Putin would like bomb Ukraine basically a little bit more. So what are you going to be watching for out of this Friday meeting and beyond?
I think that you're not going to see any change in what Russia's doing right now. They are slowly making gains in the east. The attacks that they conduct against critical infrastructure is the way Russians fight. They've talked about this for decades.
But more aggressive. Like we've seen their use of drones increase. We've just seen
well,
like
as much as he can, as much as they can actually increase what they're doing, because it is a huge resource drain for Russia to conduct this war. But I think you will see an increase. I don't know that the increase comes simply because he talked to Trump, but what you won't see is a decrease because he's talked to Trump.
And should I read anything into that conversation with North Korea? I mean, we've been talking so much about how Trump prepared for the meeting, and I think it's notable that Putin's preparation, involves a resource of troops and otherwise.
Right. So there's been from the standpoint of Russia and North Korea, there's been a useful exchange of goods, really. North Korea providing soldiers to Russia to push back against the Kursk, the earlier mission that the Ukrainians conducted inside Russia. But also there's technology transfer between both. That's become even more important given the situation in Iran. Russia was getting a lot from Iran. There's less now. And so Putin's going to get help from wherever he can.
All right. Jeffrey, thanks so much for joining us. You guys stay with us. We're also going to be